Let's get into civil disorder. It's kind of a dead week for a lot of cases. There's a few small things happening. So I'll tell you what those are. But then I'm going to tell you about a case that I haven't talked about on the internet yet because the case involves all of the internet platforms being sued. Welcome again to Allegedly Golden. If you are listening to this on audio on a podcast app and not on YouTube, I have changed locations today. I am in my closet recording this. I had thought about trying multiple locations from the beginning, so we'll see how this one works. I like the idea of doing legal content from a very non-legal place. I feel like a lot of legal content creators, it's like behind a desk with all their degrees behind them or something. And frankly, my closet is my happy place. This is where I like to be. So I'm going to do the podcast from here. Also, I am wearing the exact Aviator Nation hoodie that Dr. McKay is wearing on this season of The Pit. Every time a new episode comes out, I'm like, I have that hoodie. And we were watching it the other day, so I decided to go ahead and put it on today. So if that creates a mental picture for you, in the closet, wearing the gray Aviator Nation hoodie. We have had 10,000 downloads of this podcast so far, which I'm absolutely thrilled about. And I appreciate each and every time someone goes into a podcast app and chooses this podcast. I am very much trying to decide the best way for it to work as I go. And I feel confident in doing that because that is the way that I've built all of my other content. I want it to be organic. I want it to be responsive to what people want, and I don't want it to be too curated. I think that can also be a problem with a lot of people who are doing professional creative content, is that it looks too professional. And I'm here to make sure that professional women who also like pretty things are represented in the content creation community. But I have to say, I talked a little bit last week about being of a certain age, and I had a moment this week when something came across my TikTok feed telling me that the Dave Matthews Band was going to have a summer concert series. And that took me immediately back to my college days. That was the band. I've seen them all over the place. I've seen them outside, inside, acoustic, non-acoustic. That was the band of my days. And so I immediately started thinking about all those old times, started texting people that I went to college with, started listening to some of that music again. And, I think music is always linked to memory, right? But I put on Number 41. I put on a couple of other songs on that album, and it just immediately took me back. And I don't think I really realized until I was reminiscing that way how different that is from what I do on a day-to-day. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think about the past a whole ton. I never really have, and not because it's bad necessarily, but I'm just not really sentimental about things that happened. And I get pretty immersed in what's happening now. And so I don't really sit back and think about, I remember when I was, 21 and all these things were going on. Or I remember when I was dating that guy and we went to this concert. So it gave me a little bit of freedom from my day to day. But it also made me realize how differently I look at the world now that I am a middle-aged woman, whatever middle-aged means these days. So I made a quick list of things that have really started to hit different since I became a middle-aged woman. Now, for me, I didn't really realize a lot of these things until I actually turned 50. There was something about the 5 that just made my brain go this is a new stage of your life. But I think for a lot of people, these things start happening in your 40s. Just changing the way that you experience things in the world. So I'm going to list off the ones that came to me, but I would love to know in the comments or of whatever you're listening to this on or watching this on or on any of my channels, what hits different for you now that you're a middle-aged woman for anyone else. is I am suddenly fascinated by like how everything is made, and how like everything works. Like, do you ever go into a ballroom for like in a giant hotel for like a conference or something? I used to just walk into them and be like, oh, it's a ballroom and look at the giant chandelier. And now I walk in and I'm like, how do they get that chandelier up there? Who makes that? How do they get it in here? And who cleans it? Like, I need to know how absolutely everything is made and how absolutely everything works. I don't know if that's just like you've learned all the basics of life. And so now you're like, I must know how they make a basketball. But like everything that I see, I'm like, but how do they do that? How does that work? How much does it cost to do that? I'm endlessly fascinated by the most absolute banal things around me. And I guess it's kind of fun, but like I have so many questions. I just suddenly have so many questions. Another thing that hits different is love songs. And, there's lots of different places you can be in middle age. You can be like me, where you've been in a long-term relationship for a long time. You can be, splitting up from a relationship, going through a divorce, or you can be someone who's never been in a long-term relationship and doesn't want to be. But I think when you've actually experienced different types of love and heartbreak and loss, the songs just hit different than they do when you're young and it's all like aspirational, you know? Like I remember listening to songs and being like, oh, maybe someday I'll love somebody like that, or somebody will love me like that, or oh, this song about heartbreak is definitely about my 11th grade boyfriend who I barely even think of, right? But now having either been through myself or experienced through a friend of mine or a family, like seen almost every type of love and heartbreak and all of that. I don't know. It just all feels a lot more realistic when it used to feel more like in the ether. When I hear a love song now, I'm not like, oh, that's how I feel about my husband of 20 years. Sometimes, and it's not because I don't love him. I do. It's because like I know what it is like to really try to love someone for that long. And most of the songs just don't hit it. It just feels different. It feels different when you have had decades of experience of your own love and watching other people's love and watching other people's heartbreak. The songs just, the way that they filter through my brain is different than they used to. That's all I mean. I think this is a good thing. I'm pretty proud of this. But I have a totally different perspective when I see somebody either in a photo or in real life from a bad angle. I used to think that one bad angle of myself or others was like, oh my God, that's how that person looks. When you see a bad picture of yourself from a bad angle and you're like, is that what everybody sees when they see me? And you want to crawl in a hole. I don't think that about myself anymore. But even better, I don't think that about other people because I'm old enough to know that everybody can have a bad angle. Everybody can look bad. Supermodels can have bad angles and like, right? And I've seen some of the most, supposedly beautiful people in the world look shitty because everybody looks shitty sometimes. So I'm just not as judgmental. Like if I see somebody like walking down the street and I'm like, ugh, this is a terrible angle. I can see all kinds of things. I'm sure that you would be embarrassed if you knew that I could see them. I don't judge them. I'm like, oh, this is just a bad angle. Like I totally get it. I'm sure they look totally different otherwise. I know enough to know that no one vision of anyone is actually who that person is or how that person looks. Let me know if you agree. This is a big one that I started doing probably like 10 years ago. Whenever I see a very large home, like a mansion, whether I am, in my own town or whether I am watching something on TV and there's like mansions on TV, or whether I'm in another city and I'm like, oh, look at these beautiful houses. The first thing that I think is, who cleans it? Who cleans this house? How long does it take? Do they have to live there? Like, who cleans 10,000 square feet? And who keeps all of the bathrooms stocked with toilet paper? I have a house that has 4 bathrooms, and keeping those bathrooms stocked with toilet paper genuinely stresses me out. Every time I see like some giant house that has 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 bathrooms, I'm like, oh my God, the idea of making sure there's toilet paper in all those bathrooms stresses me out. And yes, I know that people who have a house that big have people to help them, but I still want to know. How do you clean a house that big? Do you do it all every day? Do you do little parts of it? Is it like constantly in chunks? I need to know. These are the things that I think when I drive by big houses at 50 years old. One of my favorite things about being this age is that one of the parts about going to the doctor that I hated the most, I never have to do anymore. And that is that I don't have to take a pregnancy test every time I go to the doctor. You know, when you're young and like, no matter what doctor you go to, they're like, take a pregnancy test, when was your last period, blah, 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 blah. And I just love now that I go to the doctor and they're like, you know, do you need to take a pregnancy test? I'm like, no. And they said, when was your last period? And I say 2019. I remember how much it used to stress me out. Because it's like, I'm pretty sure I'm not pregnant, but oh my God, what if I am? It's just taking a pregnancy test in general is terrifying. And so the fact that I can just waltz into the doctor and be like, nope, no possibility, changes my whole experience. At this age, I have also gotten to where I don't need to give an excuse if I don't want to do something. I just say no, thank you. I'm not perfect. I don't want to hurt people's feelings, right? And you have like your really good friends where you can just be like, girl, if I have to put a bra on, I'm going to die. I can't go. But even with like work commitments or whatever, I used to like, I felt like I had to describe it. Like, I don't really feel good, or I have an early morning or whatever. And now I'm just like, no, thank you. That's just not how I'm going to spend my time that day. Or, I'm really busy and I get very little downtime. I kind of want to be at home. Maybe people are pissed at me all over town. I don't know. But I don't care. I don't feel guilt about it. I used to feel tremendous guilt for decades about turning people down or canceling plans. And I don't feel guilt anymore. Maybe it's because I've lived long enough that enough people have done it to me in a way that was rude. That I'm like, I am a small cog in the canceling wheel. I think some of it too is, I was just at my mom's today. My mom is 82 and she's from Mississippi. So she's very steeped in like Southern tradition. But she is still worried about people thinking badly of her if she says no to stuff. Like, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings. And I'm like, who gives a flying fuck about their feelings? No one cares about my feelings when they cancel stuff on me. And I'm not being rude. I'm not saying, no, you're lame, I don't want to hang out with you. I'm just saying I don't get a lot of free time and I'd just rather spend it spending time with my family. The end. In the vein of the wonderful Just Being Melanie, who is on social media, who started the We Do Not Care Club. She's amazing. And, she's got us all thinking about, yes, the list of things that I don't care about is like monumentally long at this point. But I also feel the opposite side of the spectrum from that, which is that either I don't care about it, or if there's something I do care about, I care about it the most that anybody's ever cared about anything. There's like no in between. I can't care about something sort of. If I'm like, I'm going to find this sweater. I'm not going to look for the sweater for an hour and then let it go. I'm going to look for that sweater for 2 fucking weeks until I find that sweater in the fabric that I want, the way that I want it, because I care about it, because I only care about a few things. If there's an issue that's happening in the world that I care about, I don't care about it a little. I care about it the most. I think part of it is like I've filtered out the things that matter and the things that don't. And I think when we get to this age, we are very good at honing in on like, I've been around the block enough to know that all these other things, like, no, I don't care, because who gives a shit? But the things I care, I still have energy and I still have empathy and I still have caring in me. I'm just going to direct it towards the stuff that matters to me. Let me know what things come to your mind about things that hit different when you're 50. I'm going to keep writing them down. as I go through life. But I just have to say, as someone who consumes an awful lot of crime content, an awful lot of true crime content, like most people who look like me at my age do. When I watch true crime now, there is a very specific formula. And I guess this is generally the formula I've picked up from cops, which is I don't watch like the murder or whatever and go, gee, I wonder who did it. I'm like, okay, well, first we need to know if it's the husband or the boyfriend. Okay. First, we're going to go through that. Like instead of just watching true crime content as if it's entertainment, I am actively participating in my mind in the investigation of this crime. And maybe young women do that because they have a lot more true crime content than we did. But I remember the first like 10 or 15 years I watched Dateline and I was just like, oh, I wonder what happened in this case. And now I'm like, no. I'm looking at it and I'm going to figure it out when you figure it out, maybe sometimes before you figure it out, because I am part of this. I am part of this investigation and I'm going to help you find the killer. So let me know what you think. There's a lot of things out there that are just better and easier because of the fact that you don't give a shit about much. But I've just noticed that many experiences feel different. And for the most part, I really like it. Let's get into civil disorder. It's kind of a dead week for a lot of cases. There's a few small things happening. So I'll tell you what those are. But then I'm going to tell you about a case that I haven't talked about on the internet yet because the case involves all of the internet platforms being sued. So I'm going to tell you about that on a forum they don't control. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of a, trial run on Lively Baldoni for what I think each party's theme would be if this case does go to trial. And by that, I mean kind of an opening statement, but, it won't be exact because I've got argument in there and you can't do that till closings. So it's not going to be legally correct, but just sort of my idea of what the theme of each side's case would be. Because when you go to trial, you have a theme. You have to. And how you position yourself and how you position your case. So when we get to the end of civil disorder, I will do that for you. On a couple of cases that we have been watching, the Lululemon versus Costco case has been stuck for almost 2 months now in pleading disagreements that involve Jacques Moret, which is now the other defendant being sued together with Costco. And Jacques Moret is the company that makes the offending items. So remember that Lululemon sued Costco and said, you're violating our trademarks and our patents by selling stuff that looks like ours and selling stuff that has similar names as us. And Jacques Moret came in and said, well, we're the ones who make it, so you're going to have to take it up with us too. And there's been a little bit of wrangling and legal argument and, frankly, a pissing contest between Lululemon and Jacques Moret and Costco about how all this is going to be set up and where Jacques Moret is going to sit in the case. And they are still working that out. And hopefully they will work that out soon so that we can get discovery going in this case. Because as many of you know from following Lively Baldoni and other cases, once people get into discovery, they have discovery disputes. And the discovery disputes go on the public docket that we can all see. So I'm just sort of waiting for Lululemon to really get going. In the Karen Reed versus Proctor matter, the civil rights case that she has brought that is now sitting in federal court, we are waiting for Karen Reed's responses to the motions to dismiss that were filed by the defendants. I have a long and involved video on my YouTube explaining those motions and what they mean. I have a chart that is available at the first tier of payment on Patreon that explains who made what arguments. But I don't think it's really going to hit the news cycle until Reed responds, because people don't really care about the defendant's arguments. They don't care about, Brian Higgins' arguments about his rights being violated. What they care about is how Karen Reed responds to that. And I'm on slight alert that the news media might not report it right, because these are very complicated. And it has a lot of jargon in it that I'm not sure that mainstream media is really going to get. So they have gotten an extension in that case until March. So I'm kind of in a holding pattern on that, waiting to see what Karen Reed's responses are there. However, there is something going on that I think all of us who care about social media, and particularly those of us who have children on social media, need to be aware of. And I remember these cases being filed back in 2022, but I haven't really been following them until now. And I think it's really important that I get back to following them. Multiple cases, and by multiple, I mean well over 1,000 cases were filed against the major social media platform companies: Meta, Google, Snapchat, and TikTok. And all of the cases claimed that the algorithms used by the social media platforms were harmful to children, to minors. And there were different flavors of it, and there were different kinds of injuries. Some of the injuries were mental health problems. Some of the injuries, unfortunately, were children losing their lives. And there were so many of these cases filed that the court did something that it has the power to do, which is sort of combine them all together in multi-district litigation and say, for purposes of some issues, we're going to put them all in the same place, so we only have to decide things once. But when we get to trial, we're going to try them separately because everybody has the right to their day in court. And the first case to go to trial is happening now in Los Angeles in state court. And that is a case called KGM versus Meta, Google, TikTok, Snapchat. And this case is critically important because what happens in this case may determine what happens in all of the other cases. It is very much a bellwether for what happens with the rest of these cases. And it is very important, obviously, for the families of these children, some of whom are not even children anymore. It's taken so long. But it's also very important for the social media platforms because the argument that is being made is that the algorithm itself, all the different algorithms, right? They all have one that's a little bit different from the other, is such that it sucks kids in the infinite scroll, right? The rabbit hole that you can just go down and there's just always content. It never stops. And that the infinite scroll, together with the ability to alter your appearance, so filters, and together with a reward system, so likes, that kind of stuff, creates an inherent danger to children because their mental health is not stable enough at that age to understand or to protect themselves against what these products can do to them. And some of the cases that have been filed are absolutely heartbreaking. They're all heartbreaking, right? But some are more extreme than others. And KGM's case, she is now 20 years old, and she is a young woman, and they claim that her use of this algorithm, or all of these algorithms, caused her severe mental health issues. She became depressed. I believe she developed an eating disorder. And she had really serious concerns and mental health problems about her appearance. And this is the first case that is going to go to trial. So I think it's really important that every citizen who uses social media understands these cases. Obviously, people aren't really talking about it all that much on the platforms that these people control. I'll see what happens on YouTube when I post the video of this because Google owns YouTube. But I'm not saying it on TikTok because I've been banned there for stuff that is way less controversial than this. So I'm going to keep this on the podcast and on YouTube if they let me. So let me kind of walk you through what's happened so far. So the plaintiffs filed these cases, like I said, they all happened in about 2022. And the social media companies did what you would expect them to do, which is they said, we need to throw a bunch of these claims out. The plaintiffs had tried a bunch of different legal theories because there is no existing legal theory for this, right? There's no law that says social media companies shall not create algorithms that cause dangers to children, right? There's no specific law that you can point to that's being violated. So you have to find a legal theory that works. And the plaintiffs and their attorneys found a bunch of different legal theories. And the social media companies moved to dismiss them. And they won some and they lost some. So some of the theories that didn't survive were theories of products liability. The product itself, as made, hurts people. That is an argument that you typically see more often with cars, tires, trucks, heavy equipment, right? That there is no way to make this product safe. The product simply by existing hurts people. The judge said, no, that's not the right theory for this case. They also tried discrimination. That these algorithms discriminate against young people. And that didn't quite fit either. And the judge said, no, I don't think that one quite fits either. And there were a couple of others that the judge said didn't quite fit. But she left two standing. And the two that are left standing are the two that are going to trial in Los Angeles. And those are negligence and fraudulent concealment, which is sort of / failure to warn. So let me tell you what those mean. Negligence is the simplest and most common civil claim there is. It's pled in every personal injury case. And to show negligence, you just have to meet 4 elements: duty, breach, causation, and damages. You have to show that somebody had a legal duty, that they breached it, and that breach caused damage to the plaintiff. The duties that are out there, it's so weird whenever I teach this and I say duty like 100 times, it starts to sound funny. There are innumerable legal duties that we can all have depending on the time and the circumstances. You can't just go pick up a book and say, what are all the legal duties that people might have? Right? You can say you had a duty to drive the speed limit. You had a duty to not be drunk. Right? You had a duty to make sure that there were adequate access to water at a concert. Right? So you can craft whatever you think the duty is that was in fact breached in this case. And what the plaintiffs in this case against the social media companies have argued is they had a duty to make sure that if they were going to allow children on their platforms, that the algorithms and the platforms made sure that those children were protected in some way. And the judge said, you know what, that's enough. You can put that in front of a jury and let a jury see if they think that that's true. So that one has survived. The other claim that has survived that is going to go to trial in Los Angeles is fraudulent concealment or failure to warn. And this is sort of like a products liability kind of a claim. It's a claim that says a company knew that something was dangerous and they hid it. They hid the danger and they didn't tell people, ooh, that might hurt you. This can very oftentimes be used when people sue like pharmaceutical companies for the side effects of drugs that they didn't anticipate. You knew that this thing caused hair loss. You knew that this caused paralysis and you didn't tell us. So the argument for that is you knew that these algorithms created an addiction, especially for kids, and you did nothing about it. In fact, in some cases, you decided to make it worse. So those are the claims that are going to court. Now, they went through the whole discovery process. I don't know what all the depositions were, but they did a whole bunch of them. Some of it's on the public docket, some of it's not. And then summary judgment motions were filed. So if you've been following Lively Baldoni, you're learning this is very typical. There are multiple off-ramps in a civil case where the defendants can say to the judge, this case doesn't need to go any further because the law says it should stop here. The first one is the motion to dismiss. The second one is the motion for summary judgment. So all of the defendants, all of the social media companies filed motions for summary judgment saying to the judge, now that we've been through discovery and we have the information, this doesn't need to go to trial because based on the information that we've discovered and based on the applicable law, there's nothing for the jury to decide. The law says this stops here. And the judge denied every single motion for summary judgment that was put in front of her. However, which is why we're going to trial, right? Because she said, no, I think a jury can find either way. And when a jury can find either way, that means it goes to a jury. But because they filed these motions, we can see what their arguments are. We can see what they're claiming, sort of what their defenses are going to be. And there are some that are obvious and some that aren't. The one that seems the most obvious to me that all of the platforms made is the problem isn't the algorithm, the problem is the users. It's very similar to the argument that gun manufacturers make, right? Yeah, we make guns, but people pull the trigger. So the problem is not us. The problem is the users. The problem is the bullies at your school who who don't like your videos. The problem is your neighbor. The problem is not us, the platform. That one's pretty obvious. I knew they were going to make that one. And then they make these two, to me, conflicting arguments about the nature of the business that they're in. There is a federal law called Section 230, you may have heard of it, that essentially gives immunity to platforms for things that people put on their platform. In other words, we're just a platform. We can't be held legally responsible for things that third parties put on our platform because we don't control that. That's what Section 230 does. That is one of the reasons why social media has not been regulated at all, because Section 230 stands in the way. So the social media companies' defense is we should be immune from all of this, because this is about what people put on our platforms and we're immune from that. And at the summary judgment stage, the judge said, I don't think so. Because they're not talking about the content that other people put on. They're talking about the system that you built that forces the worst content to the top. You gave a capability that you didn't have to give, and that undermines your immunity, which is why this thing is going to trial. And that in and of itself was a very, very big ruling for a judge to make. But they're also trying to have the other side of that argument, the platforms. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too, which is a stupid expression, I know. But they want to have it both. They're saying, well, first of all, we're immune because we're only a platform. And then on the other hand, they say, yeah, but we have First Amendment rights. So we shouldn't be sued for First Amendment rights. I thought you said you were a platform. I thought you said you didn't say anything. You just created a space for other people to say things. You can't have it both ways. You can't say I'm just a platform, but oh, by the way, I'm immune because I have free speech, even though other people speak on my platform. And the judge called that out and said, no, doesn't work that way. You're going in front of a jury. We're going to let a jury of Americans decide. The other argument that the social media platforms tried to make at summary judgment was a causation argument, which did not surprise me at all. They're going to hit every element. They're going to hit, do we really have a legal duty? Did we really breach it? And did it really cause the defendant or the plaintiff's damages, right? So they tried to make an argument that, if this young woman, unfortunately, suffered from mental health difficulties, how do you know it was us? How do you know it wasn't all the other things that were going on in the teenager's life? And the judge said, okay, I hear you, but also let's let a jury decide. We have an issue of fact. It's going in front of a jury. Right before jury selection began, this is like 2 weeks ago, right before jury selection began, TikTok settled out. They said, we don't want to go to trial on this. Just we'll pay. We'll pay. Keep us out of it. Now, that only keeps them out of this case, not against all of the 1,000+ cases. But they said, we don't want to go to trial on this. We'll just pay whatever settlement amount was being requested. And Snapchat had done that in a couple of months before. They decided, you know what? We don't want to be part of this either. We're not going to go to holy war over this. So TikTok and Snapchat have now left Meta and Google by themselves. So it is only KGM versus Meta and Google. And it's interesting because Snapchat, of all of the platforms, seemingly had the best argument because they argued that, our site runs differently from all these others. You don't open to a feed, you open to a camera. We don't have likes, right? It's much more personal than that. So they probably had the best argument that one of these things is not like the other. But I think they were also smart enough to know that if you're sitting at the defense table with everybody else, they're going to lump you in with everybody else. So those two companies got out and Meta and Google are left. So what's at issue in this trial now is Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. They are in the process of selecting jurors right now. And you obviously can't watch jury selection on TV because then you would see who the jurors are and that would put them in danger. This is a state court case, which means that media will be allowed in. I don't know if there'll be a live feed or not. I couldn't find anything on the docket talking about that. But this phase, when you are selecting jurors, is generally held to be private, as it should be. But we can see on the docket them talking about some of the pretrial issues that give us insight into the things that they are asking and some of the things that are going to be big issues in this case. Both sides have filed pretrial motions in limine, which are motions asking the court before trial begins to either keep certain evidence out or make sure certain evidence gets in. Rather than talking about it at the time and having to have a million sidebars, you file these motions ahead of time so that you can fully argue the law and the judge can make a decision about how you're going to deal with something. And each side has done that. They've actually done multiples, but I'm only going to tell you about the two that I think are the most interesting. KGM, the plaintiff, has filed a motion asking the court to limit the information that is put out about a specific incident that happened with her as a teenager, which they call the pencil incident. And it's hard to tell exactly what it is, but it appears to be an incident of sexual contact that KGM experienced as a teenager that people bullied her over. And the social media platforms want that information into evidence because they want to use it to break the causation chain, to say, if she suffered from mental health problems, it's not because of our algorithms, it's because of the pencil incident and the bullying that came after it. But KGM is saying, you don't need to go into detail about what that was. It's embarrassing. I was a child. And so what the judge has done is said, you can mention it only using certain words. You can call it the pencil incident, and you can have someone describe that it was an act of, I can't remember the exact words used, but a sexual act. And then you can argue that this was the source of the embarrassment. But we're not going into detail about what the pencil incident was. And that seems pretty fair to me. For Meta's part, they are desperately trying to limit the testimony of a guy named Jason Sadizon. Jason Sadizon worked for Meta for many years. He was a whistleblower that testified in front of Congress about exactly these issues, about Meta and its intentional disregard of user safety, and particularly children's mental health. They are scared to death of this guy, as they should be, because he can waltz in there and say, I worked there, I saw it, I even helped design some of this stuff, and I'm here to tell you, they do not care about children. So Meta knows they can't keep him out entirely, but they are trying to substantially limit the things that he can say. And I suspect that that is going to be a battle right up until the moment he sits in the witness chair. We also have a little bit of insight into what jury selection is like, even though it's happening right now and we can't see it, because the parties submitted on the docket their potential jury questionnaires. These are the questions that we want to ask in voir dire of the jurors. And if you've ever been in a jury pool or you've ever been a jury, made it all the way through, you know the kinds of questions that they ask. A lot of them are really standard, like what jobs have you ever had? Where do you get your news from? What channel? And some of them seem pretty standard, like, what are your opinions about people who file lawsuits? Trying to figure out if people lean more plaintiff or more defendant, that kind of thing. Who do you admire in the world? That kind of stuff. But they have been fighting over all of the questions that make the most sense, which are questions like, have you ever had mental health problems? What do you think about children using social media? Do you think that social media has more benefits or more disadvantages, right? So the plaintiff side is arguing, we got to find out this stuff because we got to find out what people think. And the defendant side is arguing, I don't know. I mean, people can just put their personal experience in where it comes in. They're having a big battle over it. And it's probably being resolved as we speak, as they're talking to these jurors. I have no idea what is going to happen. I feel like this trial could go a million different ways. They could do opening statements, and then the social media companies are like, we fold. How much do you want? They could get to a point where the social media companies, the plaintiff gets to go first. So KGM is putting on their case, and it's heartbreaking, and they're listening to these whistleblowers and expert witnesses about all this kind of stuff. And the social media companies say, we want to settle. And the plaintiffs say, fuck you. It's too late for that now. Now everybody's going to know what you did. My suspicion is that the defendants, the social media companies, have checks ready to go at any time if it looks like it's going badly for them. The question is, will the plaintiff let them do it? So I'm going to watch as much as we possibly can. It looks like it's going to take them a couple of weeks to seat the jurors, and partially because, everybody has a familiarity with these companies. And to be on the jury, it's not a requirement that you've never heard of them or that you don't use them. It's just a requirement that you don't have any feelings about them one way or the other that would keep you from being objective. That probably takes a lot of questioning. And now to Lively and Baldoni, something a little different. For Lively Baldoni this week, I'm going to do something that I've been thinking about for a while, crafting for a while, and finally feel like I have a handle on, which is, if this case does go to trial, what's sort of the theme for each side? It's easy to think about it in terms of, well, I've seen this on social media, or I've seen what the PR strategies are. And sometimes they're similar, but a jury is a different animal. They are going to be instructed on the law. They're not the general public. They are going to have a judge up there telling them what they can and can't consider. And there's only 12 of them, and they can't talk to each other about it until it's over. So what I have done is I have created sort of the overview. It's sort of like an opening statement, but I do make argument in it. So, you can't argue in an opening statement. That's why it's called an opening statement and a closing argument. I'm not really going to cite much evidence. So this is not intended to be, legally sufficient. But this is intended to give you an overview of what the parties might be thinking about as they look towards, do we want to have a trial? And if we do, how are we going to play it? So I'm going to do Lively first because she's the plaintiff, and then I'll do Wayfarer afterwards. So here we go on Lively's side. Anyone can be harassed at work. There's no exemption for being rich or famous or beautiful. Any woman who goes to work and has to deal with men who sexualize her and cross her boundaries has the right to take those men to court, no matter how nice those men may seem publicly or how feminist they claim they are. Blake Lively isn't the mastermind you're going to hear about from the defendants. She is a young mother of 4 who began filming a movie only a few months after her 4th child was born. She was nervous about getting back to work so quickly, but she cared about the project, so she did it anyway, as women so often do. She hoped, based on the defendants' reputations and how they sold themselves and their company, that this wouldn't be a set rife with misogyny like so many that she had endured before. This was supposed to be different. But unfortunately, she very quickly realized that these guys were no different. They were just more careful about the ways that they undermined and harassed the women on set. Making a movie versus making widgets in a factory isn't an excuse to touch people when they don't want it. It isn't an excuse to walk into closed areas when people are undressed, and it isn't an excuse to show people nudity that they didn't ask to see. A movie set is still a workplace. And when these things happened to Blake Lively, she was upset. She knew it was inappropriate, and she knew it was happening because she was a woman, and she wanted it to stop. Let's be clear. Blake Lively is an actress. She wasn't the director, she didn't own the studio, and she wasn't the person in charge of everyone's wellness while making the movie. That was the defendant's job. The fact that Lively ended up taking on some of those responsibilities is precisely because the defendants didn't, and someone had to protect the film. The set was disorganized and sloppy from the beginning, which isn't a violation of the law by itself, but it allowed the harassment to continue and the defendants to go on unchecked. The only people she could go to were the very people causing the problems. The studio wouldn't help. So she found a way to fix it herself, as women so often do. The writers and actors' strike gave her the opportunity to make sure things were better for everyone when filming resumed. So she got her lawyer and made them agree to fix it. Fix the set, fix the behavior, do the right thing. And it worked. When filming restarted, everything was better for everyone. She should be the hero of the situation, right? The movie's finished without incident. The premiere is set up to be a huge success because she did the thing she didn't have to do. You would think these men would thank her. But instead, they punished her for daring to question their behavior. They hired spin doctors to make sure that online sentiment turned against her just as the movie was rolling out. They even hired a guy whose work is so secretive, no one had ever seen a picture of him. The orchestrated online campaign to destroy her was easily done with a little chum in the water because the internet loves to hate women. Within weeks, the internet was all in on Blake hate, and it just kept piling up. Old videos were dug up to embarrass her. Even her famous husband was drug into the mud. She couldn't leave the house. She was being punished for doing what we always tell women to do: speak up. And that could have been the end of Blake Lively's career easily. Audiences are fickle, and the defendants knew that smearing her would hurt her future prospects. But Lively had an angel on her side who told her who had been behind the online smear campaign. Documents landed in her lap showing her how the defendants had planned and executed it all. They did so because they were scared of her voice, because they were weak and scared that she might tell people what actually happened to her on that set. And once again, rather than crawling into a corner and hiding, Blake Lively took the bold step to speak out, this time to tell the world what had happened to her and who was responsible. And that's why we're here. Don't punish Miss Lively because she's rich and famous. Don't punish her because worse harassment happens to other people. Don't punish her because she works in movies and not an accounting firm. Harassment is wrong, period. And seeking revenge on a woman for calling it out is the ultimate evil, one that Blake Lively has lived and now asks you to help her rectify. Now, if you're a Baldoni person, you probably didn't like that very much. And you should ask yourself how you feel about that. But that is a decent argument, especially on the sexual harassment. And that is probably the argument that they would make, is all women deserve to be able to speak out without retribution. And as soon as she spoke out, they went after her. Now, yes, they'll have to prove that, but I'm just showing you what the themes and arguments might be. So now let's turn to the Wayfarer side. And I said on a TikTok on Saturday night, this one was actually much, much harder to draft. The Lively one was pretty easy. And the reason that the Wayfarer theme, the Wayfarer argument is hard is because you can't come out of the box in a trial and blame a woman who is claiming sexual harassment and retaliation. You will lose everyone. You have to be really deft and careful. about how you do it. They will not have seen everything that you have seen. She may look like somebody they know. She may look like their daughter. You cannot come out of the box as the defendants in a discrimination trial and say, oh, you can't believe her. She's a liar. You have to be a little bit more careful than that. And I don't know if what I'm about to tell you would work or not, but I think it's one of the things that potentially could. And let me just sort of give the caveat that I have no idea if this is what the Wayfarer people are thinking, but it does reflect some of the early public relations work that was done by Brian Friedman that focused more on the power idea. So I don't think I'm probably all that far off the mark. So here is the argument for the Wayfarer side. Doofus. That's what she called Mr. Baldoni soon after meeting him. In a text to one of the most famous people in the world, a friend of hers, she called him, quote, this doofus director, and asked for her friend's assistance to convince him that the changes that she wanted to make to the movie were the best idea. Clowns. That's what she called Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath before filming, during filming, and after. She called them clowns to the people she knew over and over again. You know what she never called them? Creep, predator, monster, villain, harasser. The words sexual or harassment, much less together, never came out of Blake Lively's mouth to anyone until after the movie was made and a battle about its premiere had begun. This isn't a case about the mistreatment of a woman. It's about a powerful celebrity playing a game, which, despite using all her best strategies, her Hollywood connections, and every tool in her arsenal, she couldn't win. And she wants the defendants to pay for it. The making of this movie, It Ends With Us, was a game for Miss Lively, with the help of her influential husband and her rich, famous friends. She plotted from the very beginning about how she could position herself into influence far beyond what she'd actually been hired to do, and she started almost immediately after she took the role. Miss Lively is an industry veteran who knows how to work the system, and when she was offered the part, the wheels went into motion. She knew from talking to Mr. Baldoni that he had convinced Colleen Hoover he could make a movie that was true to her book. She knew that he had spent years developing it and securing the funding, and she knew that his studio focused on projects that affect social change. Miss Lively never tried to buy the book rights or any book rights or write her own script. In fact, she never even read the book. But she had been openly talking about how she wanted to be more than an actress, and she saw an opening. Rather than being grateful for the biggest movie role of her life, she set out from the start to wrest someone else's project into her control. She didn't want to play a part in Baldoni's vision. She had her own vision. When she looked at Baldoni, someone with the public reputation for using film to do good, she didn't see an opportunity. She saw a mark. Starting at the beginning, Miss Lively rebelled against everything the director had decided about his vision. The clothes for her character, the words she spoke, the schedules, even the location of the filming, slowly making clear that her opinion was the only one that mattered. Of course, she naturally butted heads with the guy who had had a vision about the movie for years, and the guy who was paying to get it made, who, yes, were close friends and acted that way. It was clear from the start that the Wayfarer defendants did not have the same production style that she was used to. These guys believe in true collaboration, respect for the crew, informality, spontaneity. They believe it creates the best art. And Miss Lively didn't care for some of that, which is her right. It wasn't the hierarchy that she was used to. It wasn't the hierarchy she now saw herself at the top of. So she tried another act of rebellion by calling Sony, the movie studio that would distribute the film, and tried to get them to step in. She told Sony, I don't like these guys. They're weird, and my baby got COVID because the health protocols aren't good. This place is chaos. It's super disorganized. But what's the most important is what she never said. She didn't say, these guys are creeps, I can't be near them. She didn't say, I'm being harassed, I can't do my job like this. And because she didn't, Sony didn't do what she probably wanted them to do, which is fire Baldoni and hire her to be the director of the movie. They said, keep going. Keep doing what you were hired to do. And Miss Lively was angry because she was losing her game. The writers and actors' strikes were a lucky break, no doubt. They gave Miss Lively time to think of another strategy to marginalize the defendants and let them know who was really boss of this movie. So she got her lawyer to come in and make demands. The lawyer, by the way, never said the word sexual harassment either. Miss Lively threatened to walk off the project unless the defendants agreed to certain conditions in filming, many of which they were already doing. There was no negotiation, just take it or leave it. And as the cherry on top, her very famous husband would bring the defendants into their home and read them the riot act for hours about how terrible they were, to put the fear of God into them. The message was very clear. I'll only come back to the set, even though I'm obligated to do so anyway, if I get what I want. You're lucky to have me. You're beneath me in the Hollywood hierarchy, and my husband is watching. It was a good strategy because the defendants cared so much about this movie and had put so much time and money into it that it worked. They had to do what she asked. And this time she did get everything that she wanted. She got herself into the editing bay. She got the marketing to be controlled by her husband's marketing company, including taking out the domestic violence themes of the film in the film's marketing. She got to cross-market her own hair care and beverage brands with the premiere of the film. She even got most of the cast to unfollow Mr. Baldoni publicly on social media and insisted that Mr. Baldoni attend the premiere of his movie in the basement of the movie theater while she walked the red carpet. It was a full and complete victory. She was center stage and the movie was shining. People saw the film as hers, which is exactly what she wanted, and the money was rolling in, so Sony was happy. The defendants obviously couldn't do a full victory lap because of what they had lost, but they were pleased that the project was doing well. Miss Lively had played the game to perfection. She put herself on the carpet, on the poster, literally, and in the spotlight. Until Miss Lively stepped in it. Miss Lively managed to claw defeat right out of the jaws of victory by embarking on a misguided, highly insensitive media tour for the movie that managed to piss off everyone for different reasons. The book fans were mad that she had been cast, and they were mad about her wardrobe. The domestic violence victims were mad that the issue was being minimized or even ignored. The people being asked to buy hair care and alcohol in cross-promotion felt exploited. In fact, the defendants were the only ones not publicly piling on because they were making money off of the movie. The idea that these defendants would try to make Miss Lively look bad when she was the face of the movie defies sense. Why would they take a sledgehammer not only to their own project, but to their own pockets? So they stayed quiet. Even when everyone else turned on her, they never said a bad word. And when she and her husband started using their Hollywood agents to pressure Mr. Baldoni to make a statement that any issues on the set were his fault, yes, he did the smart thing and he hired additional PR talent in case she decided to take her game public. It's not illegal. It's smart. Miss Lively made a mistake, a big mistake, that had nothing to do with the making of the film and had nothing to do with the defendants. And everybody knew it. Hollywood knew it. The head of Sony knew it and said it to his colleagues. He knew that no director or producer caused Miss Lively to mock domestic violence victims on television. Some of us, I'd like to think, faced with worldwide backlash like this, would have stopped and taken stock, thought about apologizing, or at least thought about changing our approach. But that's why this case isn't about sexual harassment or retaliation, because Miss Lively didn't do that. She looked for somebody to blame. This case is about someone who refuses to look in the mirror and see that the origin of the problem is her own words and her own actions. Someone who thinks that having famous friends and family exempts her from accountability. She can't be responsible because she's special. When the hate happened, it was swift and it was devastating, and no doubt it must have been very difficult to handle. But the one place she wouldn't look was herself. And then Miss Lively caught her second lucky break, because Jennifer Abel, one of the public relations experts working for the Wayfarer parties, decided to leave her job. And through a series of truly unbelievable events, documents Lively was never supposed to see landed in her lap and gave her the scapegoat she desperately needed to avoid looking inward. She did what rich people always do. She hired fancy lawyers to create some kind of legal threat, and she called the New York Times to make sure it was all public. She blamed the defendants for everything. And here we are. Miss Lively is a mother, yes. But she's also a famous woman with an even more famous husband, and it can be hard to see her as a regular plaintiff, even though she has the same burden of proof that all plaintiffs do. No one has the desire to speak poorly about a young woman, but we also have to get to the truth. Sexual harassment is serious, and retaliation is serious, and when they occur, it is a blight on our society. But they are not a tool to fix someone's reputation so they can sell more shampoo or get more movie offers. It's not appropriate to present evidence about someone's character in court, but it is appropriate to present evidence about their actions, their self-reflections, and their motivations. What's going to be most important in this case isn't what Lively says to you, what she said publicly, or even what she said to the defendants themselves. It's going to be what she said privately to the people around her when all of this was happening. When she called the defendants clowns and laughed with her friends about winning a game these guys didn't even know they were playing, that's what she really thought. This is a case about this woman and these men and what happened on this set and nothing else. It's not about Me Too or Not All Men or any other big concept. But keep in mind, being the richest and most famous person in a workplace does affect the usual power dynamic that is the foundation of sexual harassment and retaliation. Most people don't go to the New York Times before they go to court. Hold her accountable to the same legal standard as everyone else, but don't ignore the players. She's still trying to win the game, and these guys are the only ones playing fair. So there you have it. I cannot wait to hear what your responses are. I cannot wait to hear what you guys think about that. But that is kind of how I think of it in my lawyer brain, as if you were presenting this to people for the very first time. That's what you would say. This episode is already quite long. We're over an hour. And it's been a lot. There's a lot of content in here. So for our legalese segment, which is where I try to start talking about a concept, breaking down a legal concept to make it a little easier to understand, I'm going to do something a little bit more simple. I'm going to do a process issue. In all of these big cases, you see on dockets, whether it's state court or federal court, lawyers filing motions to be admitted to courts pro hoc vice. It happens in every high-profile case. What does that mean? It's a Latin term, of course. So many legal terms are. And pro hoc vice means roughly for the occasion, for this occasion. And pro hoc vice is a way for a lawyer who is not otherwise admitted to or qualified to argue in a particular court to be able to work in that court for a single case. Bar licenses for attorneys in the United States are tied to states, the 50 states, right? You can have a license in one or more of the 50 states inside the United States. And when you have a license from a state bar, you can practice in the state courts of that state. But when you start going to other states or you start going to federal courts, it gets a little bit more complicated because each federal court, of which there are at least 94, not counting the immigration courts and the tax courts, has their own admission policy. You can't get admitted to all the federal courts. You have to go court by court. So if a lawyer wants to represent a client in a federal court that they're not usually admitted to practice in front of, they either have to fully get admitted, which can take a lot of time. Sometimes you have to take a test, or they can ask to be admitted pro hoc vice, which is what people typically do. And there's a couple of requirements that are pretty standard. They're not all exactly the same, but they're pretty close to being the same for how you can go about getting admitted pro hoc vice. So the first thing you do is you file a motion saying, hey, I'd like to be admitted only for this case. That is critical. You can't say, I want to be admitted and I'm just going to take whatever cases come my way from this court. You have to name the case and you have to say, I'm only going to be part of this case. You have to provide that you are a member of good standing of whatever state bar you're licensed in. Most state bars have that information available online. You can pull up lawyers and you can see member in good standing or member not in good standing. You can also have certificates, which usually you file with a motion like this. And being in good standing basically just means that you haven't been subject to any discipline by the bar. Right? I'm somebody who follows the rules. You don't have to worry about me when I come into your courtroom. You usually also have to be sponsored by someone who's already admitted to that court. Because you have to have, we call it local counsel, because there might be rules specific to that court that you don't know because you don't usually practice there. So you find somebody who becomes your little court buddy and says, no, this is the way they do it in this district. No, this is the way that this judge handles this thing. No, this is the way we do it in Alabama. And local counsel work for a lawyer can be incredible because you don't really have to do much except point people to the rules and you get paid. So it can be great work. So in the Lively Baldoni case, it's in New York. So all of the California lawyers, Friedman and Garofalo and all of those people are admitted to practice in the Southern District of New York pro hoc vice for these cases and for these cases only. And Mitch Schuster and Kevin Fritz and Bach and Shapiro are their local counsel. And they all work together. The last thing you have to do is you have to pay. You have to pay for everything when it comes to being a lawyer. You have to pay a fee. It's usually a couple of $100s. The client pays for it. It's not that big of a deal. And usually pro hoc vice is pretty easy to get if you're in good standing. But it doesn't make you a full member of that court. And it does give the judge some lever to pull if they don't like the way that you're behaving. They can just revoke your pro hoc vice and say, you don't get to talk in here anymore. You can work on things behind the scenes, but you're not going to represent anybody in my court. There was talk during the Karen Reed criminal case. Alan Jackson, who's a California lawyer, was admitted pro hoc vice into Massachusetts. And there was talk that he might lose his pro hoc vice status in Massachusetts court. It didn't happen. But if the judge got mad enough, she can do that because it is a privilege, not a right. And it's very much like when you're pro hoc somewhere, you're a friend of a friend, right? So you got to be on your best behavior because not only can you make yourself look bad, you make your friends look bad. So that's what's happening every time you see one of those motions on the docket. A question I get asked all the time is everybody working on this case listed on the docket as being admitted or being admitted pro hoc vice? And the answer to that is no. You only have to make an appearance to the actual court if you're going to represent the client in an official way in court by signing a pleading or standing up and arguing. But there are plenty of people working on these cases behind the scenes whose name we've never seen, because they're not actually going to do the representation in court. They're doing the work in the background. So that was a decently long, I kind of liked the length of that, just over an hour and 10 episode of Allegedly Golden. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give me your feedback on any and every platform that you like. And we'll see what happens in the next week. And I'll be here because the drama never stops and somebody has to make it make sense.